What the book refers to as the prospectus is what we here call a proposal for doing a master's thesis. In the introduction, kind of generally you're saying, here's what others have done that's similar. Here's why I want to do my specific thing. And the method is basically the procedure. What you do, what you measure, who you measure, what kind of design you use to analyze your experiment. Just everything exactly that you're going to do. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, first studies almost never go well. First time you try something. And so it's especially good when you're doing your master's thesis. You really only have one shot at it. To do this, think it all the way through. Go through the literature review, decide what you're going to do, predict exactly what's going to happen, and discuss it with someone else who may have more experience. And also, explaining it to your mother in a way she understands means you're clear about what you want to do. So, or just having your roommate or someone read it, or you explain to them, because a lot of times you don't really think about some things until you actually try to explain them. Now, PsycInfo is the primary psychology research tool. It's full of abstracts. It's virtually everything that is ever published in psychology. And the abstracts, of course, are very short summaries. They're mostly peer-reviewed. There's a few in there that aren't. And they're not accessed by Google or any free service, PsycInfo itself. Some of the articles in there will be, but the PsycInfo database is a paid database, and the only way to access it is by going through some service like the library. So even if you're off campus, you can sign on to the library and access PsycInfo, or you can do it from a campus computer. And there are some topics that are kind of not always straight psychology, like human factors, but it's really kind of applied cognitive psych. And the search is really a lot like searching with Google or any internet searcher, but it just searches that database. And it has its own little specific advanced search options. It has searching for specific fields, a specific title, particular date, or you can search for a title and you can narrow the date range down if you don't notice what it is. And you can search the whole article, or you can search the abstract or just the title. And you can also exclude things. So actually you can do some of the things like this in Google too, but if you have, you know that you're looking for articles only, you might have decided that books are simply not really that appropriate, then you can just exclude books. And it's probably not that big of a problem with languages, because most of the psychology journals are in English, but not all of them. So you can exclude, you can say only English. And if you're doing some study, like I often do them on some kind of learning, I don't want to mess with ones that deal with drug use or animals or particular neurotransmitters. Mine are just kind of behavioral, so I can exclude terms like this, especially if I search for something, see I have 20,000 hits, and start skimming down through there and going, a lot of these have to do with people who are given drugs, and I don't have a license to give people drugs. And you can also, if you go down through there and there's lots of kid studies and lots of old people studies, and you just want to do adults like freshmen, then you can pick your age group. And so anyway, you can go down through there, and even if you don't know exactly what you want to exclude, reading down through your 35,000 hits, just skimming a bunch of them, can give you an idea either of a new search term to go for. There is actually a Psyc.info thesaurus too, so you may decide learning is a good term, and you may not realize that the kind of stuff you're doing, you really should be using memory instead of learning. Learning will deal more with animals, memory more with people. And by reading some of these things, it may cue you to that. Or by looking up in the thesaurus, that's a good way to do it too. So anyway, like I said, read a few pages, see what you got, narrow them down until you have studies that just have what you want to do. And when you get to a good first article, like one that you go, that's pretty much like what I wish I had done, then you can search for that same author, because that author will have done stuff probably related to that. And you can get the whole article, and you can search, you can go into the references and find the ones. When you read the article, you'll see that maybe 2 or 3 articles are really main supportive articles, and others are just ones that have a mention. So you get the main articles and look for different authors in them and different search terms in them. And you'll find that a lot of the information you've learned in reading these articles is things you can use to make your own introduction. And there are other databases. One, we have the Psychology and Behavioral Sciences collection. It's pretty good. There's a big overlap between what you find with it and what you find with Psyc.info. Things like JSTOR are likely to give you stuff that's actually outside of what you really want, but sometimes it'll give you stuff that you need that Psyc.info didn't have. Like maybe sometimes in memory, I was looking at some advertising stuff a while back, because advertising, to some degree, they want you to be able to remember their ads. And so advertising journals were not showing up in Psyc.info, so some of these others found that. And Google Scholar, which is not really a database itself, but it searches, it finds some pretty good scholarly articles. I wouldn't use just that, but it may find stuff either because it searches different things or just because it searches in a different way. And you may have found an article when it was number 2009 in that Psyc.info list and never gotten to it, and Google Scholar might pull it up in a different order. And there's lots of articles online full text. And one thing that people don't always realize is if you look up Psyc.info and it does not give you a reference for how to find it online full text, there's 2 reasons. One is we don't get it in the library. The other is we actually already have an in-library subscription to it. So we have a lot of in-library like electronic subscriptions. And anyway, so we may subscribe to the journal. It won't show up that way. So if you click on it and it doesn't give you online full text, and you check on where to go, how to get it, it may fill in the interlibrary loan thing, a lot of the information for you. And that's always real handy, and that means we probably don't have it in the library. And interlibrary loans work pretty well because nowadays they actually copy the article and just email it to the library, so it's actually pretty fast. And kind of as a last resort, you can email the author himself or herself and ask for a copy or for information. And there's a couple of pages of Psyc.info output in the example in the book. And you can also, if you sign on to Psyc.info, you can put your flash drive in and you can make a search and you can copy the search to your flash drive. One thing that people do, which is really, really inappropriate, is to cite something in their article, in their abstract or introduction, when they didn't really read the article. They just read the abstract. So abstracts are to see what's there. They're not to actually use as information. And then once you're really serious about what you're going to do, write the method section. The participants are, participant section is a description of the people you are using. The apparatus and materials has to do with, apparatus is mechanical things like a computer. Materials are things like word lists or some type of stimuli, things for people to read. And the procedure is what you have people do. So basically, if you do a good job of this, someone else can read your experiment and replicate it and do it exactly the same as you did. So you definitely need the APA publication manual. They have very specific statements about what goes in each section. And extra stuff is wrong. It's not just what goes in there. It's, stuff you put in that you didn't need yet is wrong. And you don't want to be creative. I already said that. And procedure in terms of what you do could be how fast you present words, how long someone had to solve a problem, just whatever you decided to do to them. And then the introduction, which you probably have kind of started before you did the method but didn't really fully write it up. People usually kind of do this a little later on. So it's your literature review. For an article, it's not as complete as for a thesis or a dissertation. You expect in an article that your audience is already pretty familiar with this literature, and you're just citing enough stuff to remind them of what you're doing. In a thesis or dissertation, it's part of your job to do a thorough background search. And you kind of start with, if you think about in school, they said do a report on this topic. So that's kind of what the abstract is in a real general sense. And then as you explain this, the theory suggests something that hasn't been done yet. And what it will mean is, if I do this thing that hasn't been done yet, what would it contribute, like to the world of research? What little bit of knowledge would it answer? Would it provide? And then the last part's the references. And so you carefully, every time you say something in your body of your paper that's a statement about what someone else did, you reference them, you cite them. And then every time that's done in the text, you put an entry in your reference page for that author.